welcome back to the podcast. The owners of Oh You're Lovely, Stephanie here, along with Maggie. Today it's gonna be a little bit of a mixed bag, so to speak, on some of these topics. So we've asked you guys to send in your questions, and we've got a couple of those questions ready to discuss, and then we have a couple other things that we'd like to chat about. We'll see where this goes today. So I think, Maggie, we'll just dive in. Does that sound good?
Yep.
We have no housekeeping or anything like that. So I'm going to read this, so it's going to look probably weird on camera. But here we go. First question was, obviously you're very talented with your designs, but do you think your success with craft shows was because the flowers were so new and unique, your prices or your designs? I'm trying to sell my items and things are very slow. Trying to find my market, pricing, and developing my design. Not sure if I should do the craft shows, Etsy's, or ... All right, that's a lot in one. We're gonna break that down and talk it out.
Which one of us is gonna start, because there's a lot to unpack there and talk about.
Why don't you start and I'll chime in with my 2 cents.
Okay, so there's a couple different ways to talk about this and look at it. It's not just like an easy, clear, like this is this and this is this. But before we did this, Stephanie and I each owned small businesses where we did sell at craft shows. We sold to stores. We've done all that stuff personally in our own little businesses. I actually started selling my fiber art at a farmer's market. That's where I got my start with everything. I will say, when you're trying to find your market and you're maybe getting frustrated, there's a couple of things you have to think about. Not every local community is gonna be able to financially support every product that comes on the market. Sometimes communities are just small. There's not really a space for it. And if that's the case, if you're in a smaller community and you've reached out to local stores and you've tried things and it's not really working, I would suggest expanding where you're looking. Look at the bigger cities you're closer to, check out galleries. I sold to multiple different gift shops and hotels, to art galleries. All those places are approachable. There's no reason to not approach them. They like it because then they're not having, it's less they have to get at trade shows and stuff. They like getting from local makers.
Well, and the worst they can do is to say no. Right, we're not interested.
And I, from getting the guts up to approach local businesses when I lived in Asheville with my fiber art, I nailed some deals that, I made $35,000, $40,000 over the time I was with them, selling them my fiber art. So I would say just expand your search and don't be afraid to talk to people and don't be afraid of being told no, because it's not always going to be a yes. So the other side of this, Stephanie, why don't you kind of talk about craft shows? I know we've both done them. I think the one thing I'll say about that, and then you should take it over, is that some are going to be a huge, huge success, and some you're not going to sell anything.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And you have to be aware of that. Okay, so I'll say too, from my own experience, so it wasn't just craft shows that I did. It goes back to the previous episode when we were talking about buckets and your income buckets. So I was selling at craft shows. I was doing consignment at different stores, in my area. And then I was also doing, I rented a booth at a vintage store that also allowed, things that weren't obviously vintage. You could mix that in. So I was selling, and this was not just the flowers themselves. I had always used that as a way to do things for most of my handmade business, all of the things that I sold. But with the flowers in particular, yes, I think that the newness of it probably had something to do with it. I also think that sometimes seasonality really will bend in your favor. And this is a story, I'm going to tell a quick story that has nothing to do with what I sold. But I remember way back when, during probably one of my first craft shows, and this was when I was selling purses and stuff. But one of my booth neighbors, who's now a really good crafty friend, it was in the middle of February was the show, and we had a blizzard happening. And she sold out of summer skirts like just sold them out completely. And she and I were talking about it, and really what it came down to is we were so sick and tired of winter. We were so excited for spring and summer to come. And then everybody, that's what they bought. They weren't going to buy a scarf because they were so over it. They were ready to like start the next season. The same thing can be true with the flowers. I had the same thing happen at an early spring event where it snowed, and that was beneficial for me. Like I sold out at that show because so many people were so tired of looking out the window. They wanted something that way. So seasonality can also work in your favor. And it's not something you can plan for. It just happens when it happens, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that there's a debate sometimes about like how you present the flowers, if you should do things like super colorful or if they should all just stay cream so that they can be kind of a little bit more, I want to say generic in a way so that it fits anybody's home style. I don't necessarily look at it that way. My own personal way that I did it during the shows was I would color group. So if somebody really loved purple, I'd have an arrangement that was all different shades of purple. I did have some cream ones mixed in there too. And then I had some crazy colorful ones. However, it didn't look like a hodgepodge of stuff because I planned my displays to be very eye-catching, engaging, and bring people in with, you know, varying heights and all that other fun stuff, along with different signs, getting people's attention that they're wood flowers and things like that. So it's
Stephanie,
some ways it's all about the marketing.
What else do you suggest to people? There's one more thing you always tell people. Do you know what I'm going to say? Well, you should have a range of prices.
Oh, for sure. So I was going to say two other things then. Yeah, range of prices. I kind of split it. 25% was the low end stuff. So anything under $20 I would consider low end. And then I'd have 25% that were like 65 and above. My sweet spot was that $30 to $40 range at craft shows, whether they were giving it to somebody else or they were keeping it for themselves. That was kind of the sweet spot. And I had a range of different items. Now, if I was to do this now, candle toppers would be something like nobody's business that I would be making a ton of those things, just because they make for a good gift. But I had done mostly like, I kind of go in that kitschy kind of vibe. So I was doing a lot of like teacups and creamers and all this other stuff where I could get those vases for like 25 cents at my local thrift store so that I could keep costs down.
Craft shows, Stephanie and I in our, you know, previous professional experience both had pretty good success at craft shows. I definitely had some that were total bombs and sucked. But
oh, sure.
Doing something like this, having a small business and trying to find other places to sell, you're gonna have stuff that just totally tanks. And you can't get all butthurt and like, oh, this sucks, I'm not doing it well,
I
suck.
I don't know
what I'm doing. But it's just, there's no way to avoid it. Like, it's just going to happen. And you got to come to each show prepared. Like, it's going to be amazing because you don't know if it's going to be amazing or not.
Right. And that's where having multiple buckets are important too. Yes. Because I know that some people are able to live off the crafts like circuit, and some of them travel all over the country. There was no way in my life that made sense. So the craft shows can be stressful and time intensive. And typically, like in Wisconsin, you really only have a window when there's shows happening. There are some winter ones, but for the most part, like spring till early fall is like bread and butter. Like every weekend you're doing something. But in those off seasons or in the weekdays, you kind of have to have other things too. So I would definitely diversify where you have your items. The other thing I think, Maggie, did you do a lot of custom stuff? Because I never did. I never liked to do custom work. So I just made everything.
I didn't like doing custom work. If I would get approached and I really liked the person's vibe, I would do it. But I never enjoyed it. No.
Yeah. And so that's a whole nother business model. Like if you want to go into the bridal market or custom work or custom arrangements, that's definitely like craft shows would be a great way to market that. Like I got asked at craft shows quite often, like, will you take wedding orders and stuff? And when I first started out, I kind of like was thinking about it, but I made that decision pretty early on that I wasn't interested in doing that. However, if that's the craft shows would be a great way to market yourself if that's what you want to be your primary kind of focus. Doing a couple of those as well so people can see what you're capable of doing. So
I think one other thing, Steph, I want to mention, and again, all of this, you guys, this is coming from our own personal experiences. Mm-hmm. I would not say we're experts. We've just done these things. So one thing I want to mention, if you're going to go down the craft show circuit, don't be scared. And Stephanie, you might actually disagree with me on this. Don't be scared of the really expensive ones, because they're probably really expensive for a reason. Mm-hmm. So I don't really remember the most I've ever paid to be at a show, but I think it was close to $600. But it was worth it. You know, I made $7,000-$8,000. So
I think when it comes to that stuff, you just need to do your research. Also I will say be persistent, because a lot of those bigger shows or higher end shows, they do a breakdown of like, we allow like 50% or 75% are previous vendors. And then they only let in like a small percentage of new vendors to keep things like changing, but also those who have done, like, they want to also have some consistency in the shows. So there was one show that I never was able to get into. And then they went defunct afterwards. But it was a show that was like my tippy top, please let me get into the show. I've made it. Yeah. Yes. And I never got into it. It was such a bummer.
Yes.
But I did it every year.
I applied every year too. I kind of almost want to say the name of the show, but I won't. But it was like the biggest one in the Asheville area. I desperately wanted to get in. Like, so many of my friends who were in the craft industry doing other stuff like making jewelry and this and that had gotten in. Yep. I had professional pictures. I got into every other show I wanted to, and it was killing me. And I finally found out what it was. The people who put the show on are vegans, and they didn't want any animal products in the show. And because some of my stuff used silk and wool, they didn't accept me. Was the reason. But I only found that out from somebody who's close to the people who put the show on.
That kind of stinks that they didn't put that in the application process.
I know.
Too bad for all the leather workers too. Jeez.
You never know. Like, no. So again, I guess that leads into like, don't speculate. Like, oh, I didn't get it. My work sucks. Because in my case, I don't really think that was the situation. I just used animal products, wool and silk, and the people who ran the show weren't about that. So I don't know.
I hope that answered that question. I don't know if it did or not, but I am persistent, and I keep trying. Like, I look at every single quote unquote failure as a learning lesson. I might not understand the lesson for like 6 months or a year after the fact, but I still look at them as learning lessons. So I would say just keep plugging it, keep experimenting, and definitely expand your bucket options. So don't just rely on craft shows, or just don't, because even if, say, you are doing consignment, for example, and that's going to get into our next question, but if you are working in consignment, there are some months where it's just going to suck. Like, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the store that you're consigning at. Like, just the spending habits that happen, you just start to learn, okay, so June, like they always say the J months. The J months are not great for retail. January, June, and July. So you could start to see those trends and know it's nothing personal. Business is never personal. Don't take it personally. It's not personal, just as what the habits of spending are. So, but definitely keep experimenting and keep being persistent, because something will click eventually, and it's amazing when it does. All right.
What's the next question? And these are questions people sent us, ladies.
Yes, they either sent it via YouTube. Our email address, if you want to send us a question, is podcast@ohyourelovely.com. We would love to answer your questions. And then we also will randomly just ask within our Facebook group too if people have questions, and we'll kind of store them away for another episode. So this next question is, hello, ladies. Your bucket podcast was great. Well, thank you so much. One of the things I am struggling with is, what is the normal percentage you would agree to put your things in someone's shop? In a town, one person is $75 a month for a space and 10%, while another one offered a 40-60 split. Thank you so much for helping out with growing our small businesses. Well, Well, thanks for your question. And that was from Heather, I believe, Mankey. You want to dive in, Maggie?
Sure. So I actually, in Asheville again, when I was a fiber artist, I did multiple different consignment setups. I mean, this really comes down to what potential you think each individual store has. So if somebody's offering you consignment with no rent, that's obviously less of a risk for you. But I had success in Asheville in rented booth spaces with more of a percentage than 10% on top of the rent. So for me, again, and I know this probably isn't helpful, but you really got to look at each individual one, the amount of traffic, the kind of traffic they're getting, the location in the town, what other kind of vendors are there. Because if there's a distinct difference in the quality of vendors, like if the rent one has like vendors with way better stuff, then I would definitely go with that one. And also, if there's a way for you to gauge how long vendors have been in an area in a spot, that's another telltale sign of if it's worth it or not. Sometimes people cycle through those places, they really want to give it a try, it doesn't work. But then there's places in Asheville where the same people have been there like 15, 16, 17 years in their same booth. It's obviously working. So just take note of all those things and take them into consideration.
Yeah, I would say similar, do your homework. So in that case, like before, like it's okay to take your time to make a decision. Like go to that store randomly, see what the foot traffic is, see like I would go multiple times in all honesty, depending on like the amount of investment that you're going to be making so that you can see like, and it depends too. Like for me, a vintage booth, I was responsible for everything. I paid a rent and then I paid a percentage for like the credit card fees and things like that, which is pretty common. But I was responsible for making sure the booth looked good and bringing in new product and fluffing, basically. It really came down to the amount of time I was willing to dedicate to that to make it successful. Whereas like in a true consignment type situation, you drop the things off and the store kind of is the one that is going to do all of that stuff for you. And stores are set up a little bit different. Some stores like to group like their artists in their own little areas. Some stores like to spread it out all over the place. It kind of just depends on also like your gut feeling. Like, would I shop there? Do I enjoy the other people that are there? Does everything make sense? Is it a hodgepodge? Like, because some store owners, you know, are super dedicated and others are like, just put it on a shelf and when it sells because they don't have to pay you until it sells. So you've got to just kind of gauge the situation and just be like, look, similar to like dating, look for the red flags. Like if there's something that you're like, that's not sitting well with me, and that's a lot of money that I'm like possibly dedicating to having my items sit there, that might not be the best place to do. So I will say though, every business is set up differently when it comes to consignment and the percentages. If it's 50-50, that's no longer consignment in my book. That's like, I never had more than where they took 40% and I got 60%.
Yes, same here. Same here.
And that's the high end. Like if you can get a really great bump in shop and they only take 20%, like I would jump on that any day of the week. I would also be super like create a relationship with the owner themselves, like be hanging out at the store on a regular basis, checking out your items. If anything, like with the flowers, every once in a while, people get handsy and a petal chips off or something like that. I would routinely go in, take things away, bring new things in, similar to what I did with my vintage booth. So creating those relationships and keeping the pride of my items, you know, consistently, not just dropping them off and going, I hope they sell, like things like that. So and then, again, every store is going to have a different setup. So if they're, though, 50-50 split, I look at that as that's more wholesale. The other thing...
it's wholesale without you getting paid until something sells, which is...
Exactly. It's not ideal. I wouldn't, but that's just me personally. Oh, shoot. The other thing I was going to say, too, is if you're going to go into this realm, which I did, it's great, know your numbers. 100% know your numbers all the way down to, like, the cost of the wires that you're putting in, you know, into everything. once you know your numbers, then you know what to price it at so that it makes sense, so that you're still making a livable wage with that percentage cut in there.
Yes.
So always know your numbers. I know it's tedious, but once you have that, you can make those decisions like hard and fast. Like, this percentage I can do, this percentage I can't do. So there's that.
So something I want to tie in that we talked about in a previous podcast, but fits in with this as well. Use craft shows and rented booths, if it's allowed, to have a little clipboard out to collect people's email addresses. Even some places that you rent booths will allow you to do that. Some places won't. But anytime you can collect people's email addresses, you should do that, because that's an asset. Because if, say you set up in one of these rented booths and like you become super popular, people are going to want to know, like, you know, when you're changing stuff out. So you can send out an email, I'm changing stuff out on May 30th, and like people will be ready. You know, it'll create, if you find a place to get that hook in, it's possible to create like a semi frenzy around your stuff. So collect your email addresses where it's allowed.
Have business cards, if you can have those set out. Like in a vintage booth, I always made sure like the name of my business was super visible, and we'd have like follow us on these different places so they could do that too. Market however and every way you can, so that once they leave, they can still find you, basically. So, because I've been shopping where I'm like, oh my God, this stuff is so cute, but it's like, I don't want to purchase it today, or I want to see what other things they have. If I didn't grab a business card, I'm not going to remember, like, once I walk out that store, because I have the memory of a goldfish. So there's that too. So do all the marketing you can. And again, just like we were talking about with the craft shows, just, you got to keep trying things until you find that sweet spot. So I hope that answered your question, Heather. All right. The last question. Well, this was actually a topic brought up by somebody, one of our team members, that wanted us to talk about this. So the question was, how do you choose a business name? And I have strong opinions about this.
I mean,
I think Maggie's are the same.
For this, it's not that big of a discussion. Go ahead, Stephanie. We both feel the same way about it, and we have reasons. So go ahead.
My biggest thing about naming a business, and this came from a discussion I had with another crafty friend, and it just clicked and it makes so much sense, is I have never named a business the specific thing at that time that I'm making. So I wouldn't call my business, for example, if I was doing jewelry, Stephanie's earrings, like, or something, something similar to that. It pigeonholes you, it puts you in a box, and you cannot forever. Unless you want to rebrand and you start from scratch, from the ground up. And if you ever decide, oh my God, I hate doing this, I'm burnt out, I never want to look at another earring again in my life, you have to start over. And it's like, why would you do that? So the interesting thing about Oh You're Lovely in general, the business started with me. I had a different business that was for furniture, and this is where I actually got myself into a little bit of trouble. It was called Lovely Retro Renos. So I was renovating things. And then when some things changed, I was just like, that business name doesn't make sense for the things that I want to do. So I had to start over with Oh You're Lovely, is what came about from Lovely Retro Renos became Oh You're Lovely. And that gave me, and now us, the ability to change what we offered and did forever. Because it's a cute name, but it doesn't specifically say, oh, this is what I'm going to expect. All it's going to be is, oh, these are lovely things. And I can do that all day long, is lovely things. So I definitely would suggest a little bit more generic in terms of it could be an umbrella for a whole bunch of different things. It's kind of my thoughts. If you want to add some additional wisdom to that, Maggie.
I feel the exact same way, but a story from my history is I worked at a yarn company. They had yarn in the name of their company, but then while I was working there, we started selling some other things that had nothing to do with yarn, and they exploded. And after I left, they continued to try to rebrand and try to make an umbrella for their sub companies to go under, and tried this and tried that, and it just nothing ever took. So much money was invested in logos, websites, meeting with branding agencies, because they no longer were making them draw their money on yarn anymore. It was something completely separate, but they were pigeonholed, and they're still called the name that has yarn in the company. It's just, and I get when you're getting started, like, oh, Maggie's Floral Designs. Well, that sounds great. It does, but you're never going to be able to do anything else, or you can do whatever you want. It's just going to make it really difficult for you to be seen if you go from selling flowers to selling pottery. It doesn't make any sense, So
exactly.
Our suggestion, don't pigeonhole yourself in the name. And I also will add the caveat of, I think it's good to add some kind of word that gives some kind of emotion, as we're like, I feel lovely. Like, that just, there's no way it can't give you a semi-happy, tiny little warm fuzzy.
Yes. And I will say, when I did craft shows and people saw the business name, they're like, oh my gosh, it is so lovely. Like, they were looking at all of the flowers and they're like, this is a lovely booth and that's a great name. So yeah, I definitely agree with the emotion. It also helps with branding and everything else too. And you can get kind of creative, but yeah, know that whatever you do, nothing is permanent, right? Like, just because you're absolutely in love with something now, that doesn't mean 5 to 10 years down the road that that's going to be the same passion that you had. So I'm more like, grab your name in there, or the descriptive words or things like that, just so that you can be able to give yourself a little freedom to move around and try and experiment other things too. So there is that. All right. Now we're gonna dive into something. I don't know how heated this is gonna get.
So that answered the questions we got, and now we're going to talk about our topic for the week, which I am coining: imitation is not the best form of flattery, because it's not.
It's not.
And if you ever tell us that, we don't like you.
I get so, like, that does not comfort me in any way whatsoever. It has never comforted me, and I hate that saying. Whoever came up with it, I don't appreciate you. Don't appreciate that. That doesn't, it never makes me feel any better when that happens. And boy, oh boy, has it happened. Through I think in the creative world, I do agree with the nothing is original anymore. Like, but I do think that you can always take something and spin it to be original to you, is kind of my feeling. So, yes, everybody kind of copies each other or builds, but everybody copies, but I would prefer that everybody
takes
build
inspiration.
Off. Exactly.
Everybody
there's a difference.
Inspiration. Yes, there's a difference. There's a huge difference.
Yes.
And I think why we feel it's important to talk about this is because this isn't industry specific. It happened to Stephanie and I in our previous businesses that had nothing to do with florals. It's happened to us in our current business we have now. It happens to people we know all the time in different industries. So it's something to think about and already kind of have your ducks in a row of how you're going to deal with it. It's a sensitive topic. It's uncomfortable. We hate dealing with it, but we're 3.5 years into this, and we have now learned that it's never going to go away. We're always going to be dealing with it.
No matter how different we try to be.
It kind of, there's a spectrum of how to deal with these things and how we've chose to deal with them. We have message other business owners directly with screenshots of what they've done and our requests for what we want them to do. We have said nothing at times because it's too minor to try to tackle. We have gone after people with lawyers before, which is expensive, but we have been successful with that. And there is a time and place to do that. And I will say there's lawyers who specialize in creative intellectual property.
Yes.
So that's a whole field. They're not that hard to find. I don't even know that we can answer this question, but what warrants confronting somebody about copying you? Stephanie. Oof. She's like, oh, God.
Both of us don't like confrontation.
No, at all.
At all. I will say, I think the longer that this has like happened, it's one of those, I have to take like 24-hour period, like a period of like calming myself down, or like irrational. Irrational. I need to be rational. Therefore, I need to give myself a little bit of time to like decompress, think it through, think what I want to say, maybe consult with somebody else to be like, am I the asshole, so to speak, of like wanting to talk this through with somebody, and like, what is the best way to do it? I think like, well, here's one story. Like, we've had our photos stolen multiple times now at this point.
Countless amount of times.
One of the first ones that I remember very vividly, I won't say who, they know who they are, because we reached out to them very nicely and pointed out, those are our pictures. I took them in my living room. Like, please don't use those to sell your own products, so to speak. And they refused. They flat out said no. And so in that type of situation, websites take very seriously copyright infringement claims. So we contacted the website that hosted their website and said, these are our photos and they are using them. We've asked them to take them down. They have refused. Do what you need to do. And I would say within 24 hours, those pictures were taken down.
Yeah.
So.
And that's happened multiple times, you guys.
Multiple.
With other businesses that sell similar things.
And I will say.
Probably more than I can count on two hands.
Yeah.
It's happened a lot.
When it comes to things like that, we always talk to the person. We go in very kindly. We assume, nothing was done in malice. However, let's be honest, like, y'all know those aren't your pictures. So there's that. I will say, though, with international issues, those are a lot harder. It's kind of companies come and go like in the blink, and they use pictures that aren't theirs. And it sucks for the person possibly buying from them because they don't know the quality they're actually getting. So there's not much you can do with those. Those websites get shut down on a regular basis, but then they just open up another shop and they're back to business kind of thing. So as a consumer, I would just say be mindful of where you're purchasing from and that you feel very comfortable in who you're giving your money to and the product that you're going to receive from them. So that's super frustrating. I want
to say one thing about the picture stuff to hopefully clear up some responses we get. So generally, so far, we've had to post about picture stealing in our group maybe like once a year. Like if it gets really bad and there's like a really awful situation, we'll be like, okay, ladies, just so you know, please don't do this. It's not nice. We don't approve. And always, without fail, we get people telling us, why don't you watermark your pictures? Don't fucking tell us to watermark our pictures. Can you tell me what website you go on shopping that has all their pictures watermarked?
Yeah.
Because
you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it from the Walmart Target. You won't see it from Walmart Target end. You won't see it on a Tiffany end. Like, that is not, like, it actually, and certain things, if you're selling certain things, it actually does you a disservice to put a huge, big old watermark across a product. People are turned off immediately by that. They can't see what it is. And sometimes they actually think then it is fake. Like, it's not an actual thing. So, and then I will say too, there's so many programs out there that can easily take away a watermark and it's like, what's the point? Like, if someone's stealing a photo, you're victim blaming almost in some ways the person whose pictures are taken. Because they didn't do enough to make sure you didn't steal it. No, that's not how this works. You shouldn't have to watermark things.
No. And even though we can watermark things, it makes zero sense. We sell a supply. We sell hundreds of thousands of millions
Mm-hmm.
of particular products. We're not making one huge thing that costs $15,000. Then maybe I would watermark something because it's an original, but we're selling a supply. Most things are under $20. It makes no sense. I really wish people would stop telling us to watermark our pictures because it is victim blaming.
Yeah, and I would say the same for anybody who makes something and is selling a finished piece. I will never tell you, oh, you messed up because you didn't put a watermark on it, because I don't. It's just a Band-Aid on the issue, basically. I also really hate, and I understand why certain people do it, or like why you would do that when you're, especially when you're first starting out in a handmade type business, of like, I would love to make something like this, XYZ, and then post a picture as inspiration. I don't really like those kind of things. Like, it just never sits well with me.
So you're talking about them taking somebody else's picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what she's saying is like new artists taking like an experienced solo person's picture, posting it and saying, I would love to make something like this. Mm-hmm. They're not saying it's theirs, but it's still kind of snaky. Yeah. Like, that's somebody else's work from the community. It's not your picture.
Exactly.
If you're going to do it the right way, ask for permission.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes. Oh, and have to it's for me to like protect the consumer in some ways. Like, we've also, here's another one. We had pictures taken for somebody was promoting a class and used pictures of something that I had created on like a tutorial, and used that as advertising for what somebody could create during this class. But you didn't make that item, and you didn't teach how to make that item, and you did not ask us. Mm-mm. And I believe that one was a harder one too, as far as when we reached out, that they kind of went a little bit, they like changed it a little bit, but not, I can't remember that whole situation. I just remember it did not sit well at the end, that they didn't see what the issue was with that, or why that was something that we didn't appreciate. And sometimes, like, every once in a while, like if somebody is, for example, somebody who is selling like finished pieces and wants to show the different flowers that they can use in a bouquet or something. If you reach out to us and are like, hey, can I put this picture on my website as an example of a type of flower that I carry, that's fine. But you need to ask first, and then we get to make that decision if we want to allow that or not. It's all about the communication. And sometimes we might say yes, and sometimes we'd be like, it might be better for you for branding purposes to take all your own pictures. Like, I know that it's a lot to do, but in all honesty, then you are setting yourself up for more success with your own business because you're recognizable. But instead of using quote unquote stock photos. So there's
Steph,
some of my thoughts.
Can we talk about a couple other things we've gone through with this kind of scenario? And so there's two more kind of situations I want to talk about, and I'm only talking about them so you guys understand what potential roadblocks are and maybe learn how we've dealt with things. So we have, over the 3.5 years, gone back and forth with how much heads up do we give people about projects or sales, because we know our competitors are watching us, and at times they're on our fucking asses and try to get ahead of us. So there's been times where we've kept things under wraps and not talked about it till 8 hours before or what have you. But during a time in our professional history, we would like share ahead of time sometimes what a live would be about. Like, Stephanie, we do, different crafting lives, and sometimes a really exciting project comes up and Stephanie will post like a sneak peek. So this was 2 or 3 falls already. Yeah. Stephanie got all the supplies to make a pumpkin topiary with these flowers, with fake pumpkins. She laid it all out. She posted a sneak peek like, oh my gosh, look at what I'm going to make. This time, this date, aren't we excited? The comments got rolling. Everybody was excited. Nobody else at this point had made that project ever with the flowers. Like, I guarantee you, we were the first to say we were going to do that project. Now, have people put flowers on pumpkins, sure, but they hadn't made a topiary up to this point. So we were excited. We had it set in the post, talked about the time we were going live. One of our competitors went live about 2.5 hours before we did the same project.
Yeah.
So, and we have dealt with that so much, and it has at times affected how excited we get people about things. Because do we want to be copied? Do we want, it really is stealing our creative expertise and talent when people or companies do this. We came up with that project. We got people excited about that project. And again, it's not just about the pumpkin topiary. This has happened countless times. So in this instance, how I specifically dealt with that situation. So I did not have any kind of rapport with this company. Up to this point, I chose not to reach out to the owners of the company, even though stuff had happened in the past. But this threw me over the edge. It was too much. I reached out to one of the two owners that I felt most comfortable talking with. Had a fairly good dialogue back and forth on Facebook Messenger. They expressed that they have also noticed this pattern happening. And I want to say the person who did this, copied us, was an employee.
Right.
So when I was talking to this specific owner, they also said they had noticed a little bit of a pattern of this happening. They were concerned, but I would need to talk to their business partner, who is known in the industry for being a massive asshole. And I was just not willing to go there because I had a little bit of a run-in with this person in the past, and they were super ugly to me. So I was like, I'm not going to do that if you can't handle, you talking to them about this and trying to take care of it, and you and I continuing to talk. I was like, then I'm going to drop it. But just know, like, we're keeping track of all this. We're keeping records of when this happens, and we're not going to hesitate to take further action if it keeps
I was like, as soon as it crosses a line that can be considered a legal action, we're going to be on it so quickly. Like, we're not messing around. Like, we know where the lines are of what can be considered like something we can legally do versus something that's super annoying and super shady, but there's not really much in the legal system we can do about it. Do we like to take things to that level? Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely
we would rather
not.
be spending the money on buying you guys new greenery or new wood product. We don't want to be spending anything on legal action, period.
No.
So that whole situation with the topiary, it was really fucking uncomfortable, and it was so obvious what had happened, and it just sucks. Like, we don't have to be, and we've never said we have to be the only company that sells this kind of product line.
Oh no.
There's enough people out in the world. Other people can sell this stuff, but there has to be a baseline of respect, and that obviously was like such a huge dig at us, and it sucks.
And I'll say too, sucks. For the longest time, like when we were starting out, for the first couple of years, anytime we named a product, anytime we brought up a new color story, anything, we were always double checking to make sure that nobody else had at least done it within like the last year to 2 years. Names, we tried so hard to never, like, we purposely named our flowers the way we did and still do, because we want it to be unique to our own branding. And so there's been times when there's something that I'm like, oh man, I'd love to name it this, but somebody else has named it that already. Yes. We're not going to name it that way because we don't want the feelings that we have when somebody does it to us to give that to somebody else, like to do the same thing to somebody else. Like, that's not,
we don't want there to be brand confusion.
No, exactly.
Why? We don't want to be like any other company anywhere in the artificial floral industry. Why would we? Why would we want to copy anything anybody does? We don't want to be like anybody else. Exactly. And other companies really should feel the same way. There's no reason to like look at another company and try to take parts of their identity. Like, it's disgusting. It's disgusting, you guys. It's so gross. Don't be that person. And be ready to take the situation on if you're the one getting ripped off from. So the other scenario I think that's important to talk about is the time where we did have to take legal action. So I'll try to make this as short as possible, and we'll talk about why we decided to do what we did. So this is another one of our major competitors. We were really thoughtful about how we name flowers. And we first started, we decided to name a series of flowers after family members we had. So there's flowers named after our kids, our grandmothers, sisters. Like, we got it all covered. Everybody deserved to have a flower. So this one company in particular, they had twice already deliberately stole a project we did to where it was identical. And I have already had approached this company about it before with screenshots and had a dialogue. So we already had somewhat of a confrontation from the past.
And I will say too, these projects that they had taken were not like just, oh, it's a bouquet using XYZ colors or anything like that. It was a very specific,
very specific,
like,
yes,
build.
Very, yes.
Very specific.
So we're not, you guys, we will never cry about somebody making a bouquet in the exact color Stephanie did, or somebody doing something with this shape of a wood piece. No, but if somebody's going to deliberately copy something that was very, very different, and we know we're the only ones we did it, yes. So up to this point, I had already had a back and forth about this. They acknowledged it, said they were going to talk to their staff and make sure it didn't happen again. Well, I don't know, 6-8 months later, it came to our attention that they got a bunch of new flowers and named the flower styles the identical names we named some of our styles, including flowers named after our family members. Now, if somebody's going to sell flowers and they call a rose, or a marigold, or this or that, that's fine, because that's what they are. But if you're going to call a flower Sophia, right, or Layla, or Ken, or Pippa, like anything like that, you're not Valen. You are not coming up with
Valid. That is like, you are not coming up with that name on your own. Like, we made up that name for my son. Like,
so it was a very, very direct, they were focused in on us. They did it on purpose to create brand confusion. That's the only reason, because this company has also done other stuff. And maybe we won't talk about it, because there's a couple things they've done that we legally couldn't go after them for, but it's all to create brand confusion.
But it's still super ass shady. Super shady
shit. I'll just say another company has a flower named Maggie. It's a no-brainer why they did that. They want people, anyways.
Yeah.
So in this case, yeah, with this, we did get our lawyer involved. She was super confident that it was a very direct thing they did, and we could take legal action. Letters were sent. They did take responsibility, but they blamed it on one of their employees. But I will say, they didn't take full responsibility.
I was say they did take,
but they tried to kind of blame it on one person in their company in a way. They did, at the end of this all, do what we asked them to do, but it took multiple letters from our lawyer, because they would do a little bit of what we asked for, and they would be like, okay, you didn't get it all, you have to do this other thing. So we didn't have to go to court, but we spent the money. But the thing is like, yeah, there's a couple reasons we did it. We don't want to be taken advantage of. We want to protect what is ours and what we've created, but also we are two women, and there is kind of this like, oh, they're just women, like they're not going to do anything, they're just moms, right. They're not, they're not going to do anything. Yeah, we're fucking going to do something.
Or they're super, yeah. Well, and now, should I say what we've found through the grapevine, what was told about us because of the fact that
I don't even know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm going to say it, and then if we need to cut it out, we'll cut it out. Through the grapevine, now this is just hearsay, but it is whispered that we're just mean.
Yes.
We're mean girls. We're mean women. And
I want to
is that okay to say that
that came from another business owner in this industry that I am friends with, that has a connection with those owners as well. So it's not something that's like being buzzed around, but that supposedly the owners of this company said, we're just mean girls. We don't play nice. Yeah. I don't want to fucking play nice with if you don't show us respect and you take from our creativity, I'm never going to be nice. I'm not going to do anything directly to you, but we're not going to be friends. I'm not going to talk to you.
I mean, if we can take legal action, we're going to take legal action to, protect our own. This is our baby. Yep. And I would expect nothing less from them if we were to do the exact same thing, but in reverse. I would expect a company to get their lawyers involved. Yes. So I don't find that to be mean. And if anything, we very much are on the go high kind of team. We don't get in the mud. We don't like to do that. But there are times when we can't not do something, because once you let it happen over and over again, it becomes a precedent that, we can do whatever to mess with them. They're not going to do anything because they don't want to cause drama or they don't want to bring it up or whatever.
Stephanie, you know what we forgot about? I cannot believe we forgot about the whole crafting after bedtime bullshit.
Oh, I knew about that, but I didn't know if we wanted to get into that.
Why don't you? Okay, one more story.
I thought about it.
This story also, we had to take legal action, and this actually happened before the story we just told. So this one actually landed us getting crafting after bedtime trademarked. So, okay, why don't you talk about this one? I think it's important.
Okay, so, it's interesting how a lot of the time I want to say that, yes, the world is big, but it's also very much a small world, and random things will happen, and you'll, either a customer will let you know, or you'll just stumble upon something and go, wait a minute, what's happening? I don't know exactly how I found out about it. I cannot remember. I was on Facebook, and then all of a sudden, I saw something about crafting after bedtime, and I was like, well, now granted, that's not necessarily a unique, name for something necessarily. I could see crafters calling that. But within their posts, there were wood flowers. And then I was like, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right. So I dug a little bit deeper. They definitely were connected within this community that we're a part of. And they started doing lives and stuff, calling it crafting after bedtime. And
Stephanie,
can I
add something else?
Yeah.
So not only...
Yeah, absolutely, because your memory of this is probably different than mine.
So not only were they active in the community, they had been in our group, and they had been an admin in one of our competitors' groups. This woman had been an admin for one of our competitors' groups that don't like us. So as we started unpacking the situation, we're like, what the fuck is actually going on? This is not, if it would have been a random person that had nothing to do with the flower industry, we would have done nothing.
We probably wouldn't have done anything.
Because it's not that big of a deal. But this person had been in our group and had been an admin of one of our competitors' groups. Okay, Stephanie, go ahead.
Right. And then it comes back down to brand confusion. I had been doing personally crafting after bedtimes before Oh You're Lovely became what it is today. It was a year of me doing crafting after bedtimes before we even started selling wood flowers. So it was a really almost on a personal attack. And I don't like to make things personal like this. And I guess we can talk about that a little bit after we wrap this up, just as far as what do you do mentally, for your mental health over some of this stuff. But it hurt. It dug deep, and I was so mad, which is again one of those we take a breath so that we can get our thoughts together, and then what are we going to do about it? So again, we had to reach out to our lawyers. I can't remember in those conversations if we reached out to them specifically first. I believe we got blocked from the person. In different, they had blocked our personal accounts, and we didn't even know who it was. I had to do so much internet sleuthing to figure out who owned it, because there was also a website attached and stuff. So we were able to internet sleuth to figure out who the person was. And by the time we figured it out, they had already blocked us.
So that
on all
fueled
kinds
this
of
fucking
stuff.
fire more, because the fact that we hadn't even confronted them yet, they didn't know we knew, and we were blocked. It wasn't just us that was blocked. It was some of our close friends in the industry had already been blocked. So we put this all together, and we talked to our lawyer until it was like really obvious this was very calculated. And this isn't us being like woohoo tinfoil hat. Like, if you put the fucking pieces together, they were in our group, they were admin for a competitors group, they had us and our friends blocked. They knew exactly what they were doing.
So we were able to, because they had also bought a domain with that. So we were able to, with the lawyers' help, be able to have the Facebook page shut down. The domain was transferred over to us, and then we trademarked Crafting After Bedtime. It was a huge process. It was a lot of money spent, but again, it was to protect the brand of our business. And I don't know, that one was so frustrating and just very, very calculated. And
this is a sensitive time to say this, but again, like, I hope people know that we keep 99.999% of stuff that happens under wraps, because we don't want to get in the mud. But we have really dealt with so many things. We're not perfect. And if we ever make a mistake, we're going to fucking make it right. Even if it's to somebody we really don't like, we're still going to make it right, because Stephanie and I can't do life any other way. Like, it just, think about where you're spending your money and who you want to support. Because, there's a lot of free content out there, and if you guys like learning and stuff, just know, like, we're doing that for free. We're not getting paid. The only way we can keep doing that, is if we are selling these products. And not all businesses have the same morals. And maybe that whole thing should get cut out. But I feel like because we don't talk about our woes, people just have no idea what we've gone through. And again, we're not perfect, but we'll make everything right. We will make everything right if we do something wrong. Yes.
Or do our best to do so. Yeah.
You guys, it's been rough.
Oh, so messy.
It's been really up and down. And Stephanie and I have had to learn to have a much thicker skin. Her and I used to.
That's what I was just going to say.
Get so upset. Like, it would ruin our week. Yeah. It would ruin it was ruining our family life, because we're always like upset and like feeling attacked. Nothing has changed. Those things still happen, but I think we're just so used to it. We're like, okay, like, we assess what's going on, being like, okay, who do we need to talk to? Are we just going to let it go? Are we going to record this to keep track? Yeah. We have processes in place. And I think advice to you all is that, even though some of these stories sound really crazy, and it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to have to deal with something like that. If you're in the creative industry for any length of time, you just are going to. It happened to Stephanie and I both before, when we had our own small businesses. It's happened to artist friends of mine. Yep. I have a painter friend who has found her prints in Target and had never been asked permission. And her bio's on the back of the prints.
Yep.
So this stuff. Yes. This stuff.
That's even worse in some ways.
It's rough. People are out there to just take what they want to take, and there's not a whole lot of mutual respect, which Stephanie and I just.
And they'll deal with it if they get caught after the fact.
Stephanie and I just don't live our lives like that, and we're never going to run a business like that. Like, stay in your lane, be creative, do your own thing, and that's it. There's no reason to take from others.
You can. I'll say, we'll bring it back around. You can always be inspired by others, but then you need to change it to make it your own. Do not just be a copycat in any way. I'll say too, for like the topiary one. So now I'm not made aware until after the fact. If like Maggie sees something and is going, no, they're going to do it again, she doesn't let me know beforehand, because my adrenaline gets pumping so bad. My whole body shakes. But I will say that particular situation fueled me to make the best live that I've ever made in my life, because I just was just like, oh, you're going to do that? Let me show you what I can do with that anger that's in my body right now, or my frustrations as far as, and I think a lot of the time, I don't know, there's something about, for me, when a camera comes on, you just have to turn that off, and you're almost, in a way, it's entertainment. So you've got to, the show must go on, so to speak. Mentally, yes, we've got much more tougher skin. We're in a position where we're lucky enough that we have each other to commiserate with and to be frustrated with and be able to walk and talk through these things. But over time, we've learned to just breathe through it, decide if this is something worth fighting, like, legally, or is it just chalk it up to another one. Like, we keep records of stuff. Like, we'll definitely, we might not be able to do something about it now, but if we have enough stuff to present, being like, this is what's happening, what can we do about it? Mm-hmm. I think too, I no longer really tell my family and friends that aren't in the art world about when these things happen, because again, the whole, either they're going to be like, oh, imitation is the highest
form of
whatever that stupid phrase is. Highest
form of flattery,
what?
I think.
What is
imitation's the highest form of flattery?
Bullshit.
I cannot stand when people say that to me.
It's not.
It is not.
It's not. It's stealing.
It's stealing.
Like, I don't know. I'm not flattered in any way. So quit doing it. And it hurts, I think. And it's one of those things, as far as for artists in particular, we're such, like, usually it's independence and, like, fighting against, like, Target has been very, like you were saying with your artist friend, they've done it quite a bit and gotten in trouble from it. But what it takes is a whole community behind the artist. So you feel very small and like, what am I going to do about it? And then, in all honesty, it's not like Target's going to give that artist money for stealing their idea. They're just going to be like, oh, we won't sell it anymore and take it off the website. Like, it's just a lot of, it just sucks. And I don't know a real good way to wrap that up, to put it in a pretty bow. It sucks.
I mean, it's
you gotta just,
it's the underbelly of owning any business. It just is. Like I said before, it's not industry specific. This is just, unfortunately, how some of our population has decided to act in the world. And you might be one of those people who do that. If you are one of those people who rip off other people's ideas, steal their pictures, or do similar things we're talking to, we don't want to be friends with you. We don't like you. We're not interested in you. We don't want to be around people like that. I mean, it's the truth. It is the truth. There's no space for that in my life or my business's life. There's just not. Yeah. But if you're one of those people these things have happened to, we're sorry. Just know it's not just you. It's kind of par for the course. And just stick up for yourself. You have to stick up for yourself, because if you don't, and the people who are targeting you realize you're not going to stick up for yourself, I mean, it's game over.
Right. Be a squeaky wheel. Yep. Be a squeaky wheel. Keep talking about it, bringing it up. And I will say too, if you are ever approached that, hey, you stole my work, or you copied me or something like that, I mean, my first reaction would be completely defensive of like, no, I didn't. But you have to also like look, sometimes people are mistaken, as in it is just a coincidence. And it did just like, they have never seen your work before, and they had no idea that you did it. So I would also, like, if you're approaching someone, just know that there is a chance that they were not inspired by you. They just happen to also come up with a very similar idea, and you guys can work through that type thing. But in our case, we feel very much that it was blatantly a copy situation, and it wasn't just the whole thing with like the names of the flowers. If it would have been like Anne or Jennifer or something like that, where it was very common type names.
Like Valen, give me
even though it was the exact same.
Big Valen. Who names a flower Valen unless you got a kid named Valen? You don't just come up with the name Valen with the exact flower we call Valen. It doesn't work like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is why we could legally do something about it, because it was not a coincidence in any way. But yeah, it just sucks. So if you've gone through it, we're sorry. We know how you feel. And I hate this saying of like, well, at least you're not in this alone. You're not in the boat alone. I don't want to be in this boat. Nobody wants to be in this boat. It's freaking sinking. So it sucks.
It's just part of it. And
but I always
have thick skin. Yeah. Just stick up for yourself when it's appropriate. Keep track of things if you feel like there's a pattern of something repeating, because like Stephanie said, if you...
And I'm not into cancel culture in any way. Like, nope. I wish the best for everybody, but also just play by the same rules. Like, come on. We can all exist and be successful without the pettiness and the, just being nasty to each other. Like, we're not in that in any way ever. So I'm just like,
we're not in that way ever. But I think, this could be a whole nother conversation at some point. I think sometimes in a little part of the solo community, we're viewed as like, oh, You're Lovely girls don't play nice with others. We don't play nice with others because all the other major solo companies have done us wrong, and we've had to go after them.
They've thrown sand in our eyes numerous times.
We're not going to play nice. Every single one we've had issues with, we've confronted. So we're not going to play nice. And I don't think we should be expected to play nice. We don't do anything bad, but we're not going to sit at the same table or be in the same room at whatever. We're not going to take their phone call.
Which is interesting. We've never been approached that we've done something that was shady or deliberately copied or anything else.
Where we very first started to do dyed assortments, we by accidentally named an assortment the same name as a different company. And as soon as it was brought to my attention, I messaged this person directly and apologized and explained it was an oversight. It happened one time. That's the only time. And we weren't approached about doing something.
And the color stories were completely different.
I approached the person.
There was nothing else except for the name.
It really was truly an accident.
They didn't come up to us. Yeah.
But she's right. We haven't been confronted about ever doing anything. And if we were, we would look at it. And if we've done something, we would fix it. Because that's how we roll. And
exactly.
You guys, it's such a sensitive topic. If you guys have more questions about this, email us at our podcast at ohyourelovely.com. We can talk about it more. And Stephanie and I really, really, really try in social media to not talk about any of this hard stuff because we don't want to affect your guys' day with something negative. But just know if you come to the podcast, you're going to get stuff like this. This is our one spot where we're going to talk about the things we don't otherwise talk about. So if you don't like hearing this kind of stuff, you probably shouldn't listen to the podcast because it's going to keep coming.
We're going to be very real and raw over here. And Maggie and I both will drop F-bombs every once in a while when we really get worked up. more Maggie than me lately. What's going on? Role reversal.
Anyways, we could talk about it for much longer, but that's kind of it. We've been through it. It's going to keep happening. Be prepared. Have a thick skin. And don't be that person.
And have people around you, too, as far as to be able to decompress or talk through the issue and what makes the most sense of the next steps and actions. So it's just part of being a business in the whatever century, 21st century, is that still relevant? I don't know. But the internet makes it so much more easy to find when people are copying you, but also makes it much more rampant, I feel like, because you're so exposed to so many things. So
woo-wee, that was one topic close to our hearts right there.
It's a longer podcast today too.
All right,
you guys. Thank you so much for listening. I don't think we got too ranty, but it's definitely one of those topics that we have a lot of experience with. So I hope the first half of the podcast was super educational. So, it was like a therapy session a little bit. All right, you guys. It was. We love you. Thank you so much. Send any questions or topics to podcast@ohyourelovely.com. We'll be uploading another podcast video within probably a week or two. So we'll see and talk to you. That's what I'm looking for. We'll talk to you and see you
All
later.
right.
I'm Stephanie from Oh You're Lovely. There's Maggie, also from Oh You're Lovely. And we'll see you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.